we're here with Dr. Dan Reidenberg of Save, the executive director of Save. I'm Artyom Havoc. This is Bearded Bogle. Me and Bogle are the ones that set up this event, and we've been working with Dr. Dan to do the charity that we're doing. Which, good lord, guys, I'm looking at the wrong webcam. Sorry. Good lord, we have raised a ton of money.
What can we say that we haven't already said in chat? Like I'm continually blown away. I don't know how much further I can be blown away.
Everybody saying, "Hey, Dr. Dan," in chat right now. Yeah, no,
everybody.
Yeah, we're totally blown away and like very humbled that. Just thank you so much, everybody that's donated and everybody that's in this event. You guys are freaking incredible. So, Dr. Dan.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Save. You want to tell us about Save and Save's mission?
Absolutely. First, I want to just say thank you. I want to thank everybody who's here, who's been here this entire time, and who's coming up next. It's just fantastic. It's very exciting. I'm so honored to be here and to be all of our board and our staff and volunteers. Really thankful for all that you're doing and hoping that you're all having a great time. That's really important when we're talking about a topic as difficult as this is. So SAVE is Suicide Awareness Voices of Education. We are one of the very first nonprofit organizations to work in this space. We've been doing it for 30 years, for a very long time. SAVE's mission is to prevent suicide in some very specific ways. We want to do that through public awareness and education and training, and we want to develop materials and we want to provide support for those people that are impacted by suicide. We lead in the world in safe messaging around this topic of suicide and mental health. We've been doing this for a very long time. We've been studying how you talk about this safely, how you can, whether you put up a billboard or a radio ad or you put up a digital ad. 10, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have digital ads. We had ads in newspapers. All of these things are evolving, and it takes a lot of work to actually create messages around this that are safe, because we know that some people that are seeing messages about suicide and suicide prevention, because of what they're going through, they don't see it the way that it's intended. And sometimes there's unintended consequences. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to put the right messages together and get them out, whether it's on radio, television, digital ads, all kinds of things like that. We also spend a lot of time doing education and training, whether it's kids in school or teachers in school or training law enforcement. We spend a lot of time training doctors, lawyers. We train in the military. We do all kinds of training and education. So we're trying to help people better understand what suicide is, what it's not, the realities behind it, and ultimately how to prevent it. I know we're going to get to the warning signs in just a little bit, but we spend a lot of time helping people understand what the warning signs are and how to understand them, but what to do about them. So it's not just seeing them, but then what do you do about them? And in fact, we led the consensus-based process from people, experts around the world, on developing the warning signs for youth suicide. So we have them for youth and we have them for adults, and most people don't even know that they're different. So we spend a lot of time in the education and training space. We develop materials, they're distributed around the world. We have materials that are things for prevention and after a suicide's occurred, what to do and how to support somebody. These materials are targeted for various different audiences, for young people, for parents, for seniors, for males, for females. We have materials for law enforcement. We have materials for the military. We have all different kinds of materials. We also have materials for, we try to develop materials with safe messaging that's targeted to try to help prevent tragedies from occurring. And finally, in terms of our big kind of buckets of things that we do, we're there for people when a tragedy's occurred. This is the hardest part, really, of the job, is being there when we lose somebody. And tragically, that happens all too often. We lose somebody in the United States every 11 minutes. every 28 seconds, somebody attempts to take their life. We're nearing 50,000 deaths a year in this country. Around the world, 800,000 people a year die by suicide. That's one death every 40 seconds in the world. So we spend a lot of time trying to be there for families that are impacted by this, friends that are impacted, communities, businesses, all impacted by tragedies. But some of the other things that we do that are really pretty unique to what we do is we provide a lot of technical assistance. So I'm a consultant for the World Health Organization. I am a consultant to several different countries that are developing national strategies to figure out how to implement programs in their countries. We provide technical assistance and support to businesses all over the world, large and small, on how to develop safe places and workplace violence prevention programs. We do all of this, plus we work with all the technology companies, and we do probably the main thing that we do out of all of that is work with the media and the entertainment industry. And the reason for that is that they're huge, powerful messengers for us, right? So if we know that suicide contagion is a real thing. It's a small phenomenon, but it's a real phenomenon. And we know that when celebrities die by suicide, suicides go up. So we work with, I created the training that is used for media around the world on training them how to talk about and report on suicide safely. Just developed a tool with Cisco. Cisco has been a great partner of ours, and they volunteered 100 engineers and data scientists to develop a tool based on the best practices for media reporting on suicide. I wrote the best practices. They translated that into an algorithm. So now a journalist, if they want to report on suicide, can very quickly, instantaneously drop a story in, get feedback on it, see if it violates any of the best practices, and then put it out to the public. These are the things that we do that set us apart, that we believe on a large scale, and for those individuals that are touched by this, we can help people every day.
That's freaking amazing. So the tool that you guys are doing with Cisco, so it's a web-based tool?
It is. So people can log on. For example, if they go to reportingonsuicide.org, journalists, anybody really can, but journalists will go to reportingonsuicide.org. That's where the best practices live. And there's a little verify button at the bottom of the page. They click on that, and it brings you right to Cisco. And when you go to that tool, there's a little box. It says just drop it right in here, click verify, and instantaneously it scans the story. And all of the things that you see on that page, I help them develop not the technology behind it, but the language for it, so that when a journalist sees, for example, most journalists, when they report on a suicide, they talk about a method or a location of a death, and we know that is a thing that increases risk of others dying by suicide in the same way. So it'll scan the story and it'll highlight it, and it'll say, you probably want to try to figure out a different way to say that. And then it gives them prompts on how to do that differently.
Is this something that the general public can also use?
Absolutely. It's free. It's available to anybody. You can go to the Save website, save.org, and you go just in our search box, type in media or reporting on suicide, and anybody can go and learn how to use it. It's very simple, and it gives you a really quick way to say, if this is what you're talking about, or this is what you're writing about when it comes to suicide, this is safe and this is a little less safe.
Yeah, because I was thinking, for streamers and people that do YouTube videos on these topics, that it's something if they write a script, or bloggers.
Correct. That's correct.
That's very cool.
Yep. So we have the best practices for reporting on suicide. I wrote those. I also wrote the best practices for blogging on suicide. And you can find that at bloggingonsuicide.org. So we have sets of tools. We're incredibly grateful to Cisco for their, taking one concept and building it to a scale that anybody around the world can use.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. So how did Save get started? Like, can you talk about, what you've done in the past and what led you
Sure.
to the point that you're at right now, having started Save?
Sure. So I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I used to work in hospitals and clinics and had a private practice and did that for many years. And then I went into social services and ran a whole bunch of mental health programs and social service programs. Um, and as that was going on, and I was in my career, Save got started by a friend of mine, who we used to talk about this concept of, could there be an organization that would be called Save? Could there be an organization that reached out and gave people messages in really easily understandable language, and was all volunteer run for 10 years. And as the volunteers took over, they would go out and speak at schools, which we still do. They would write things and give them away at health fairs, and we still do all of that. But the idea was, is how could we translate the science into something that makes a lot of sense for the general public? And I was able to help create that ability. Take what we know from science and best practices and from the literature and the journals, what the researchers were doing, and make that practical for people, because it really wasn't. One of the I, I know we got a little time, so let's take a little
Oh,
diversion here from
we
one.
all the time
One
that you
second.
need. Don't
Let me tell you one
All right.
story in how this actually factored into this. I was in undergraduate school, and there was a teacher in my statistics class that happened to be very attractive, and I wasn't liking statistics so much, so I spent a lot of time at her office hours. And one day she asked me after class to come to her office, and I was like, yes, this is great. And I get to her office, and she closed the door, and she was pretty sad really immediately, and she said that her parents had called her the night before, and their next door neighbors, she knew them her whole life. One of them had died by suicide, and she wanted to get some information to her parents. And she said she knew I was in psychology, and could I help? So I went and I got her these research articles, these scientific studies, and I brought them to her office and thought, this is great. I know where this is going to go. My grade's going to go up. And the next time I went to class, I asked her after class, I said, did your parents get the articles and did they help? And she said, they got the articles, but they didn't help at all. It was too theoretical. There was too much data in there for them. And she said, can you get me anything else? Well, at the time we didn't have anything else. And that's really how this all started, was how can we create something and get something very practical. So this friend of mine, her name was Adina Robleski, uh, lost her daughter to suicide in 1979, and she and I became friends in the mid 80s. And we used to go to health fairs all the time. So we would meet and we would talk and we'd create these things. And then in the hospitals or clinics that I was working in at the time, I would work with Save, and we would do these presentations for doctors and nurses. And again, as it was running for 10 years by volunteers, it was time for the organization to really grow, because it was really very small and very local, and it needed somebody with a clinical background to really build it. And so I said, okay, I'll do this, and left my practice and started building Save.
Wow. That is, it's so interesting to hear you uh, talk about that anecdote with your teacher, because it makes it so real. Because I think in theory, I would have done the exact same thing, right? Like you have the information, you want to help, here it is. But then in practice, there so much more comes with this whole situation. It's not
Right.
just, it's not just science. And the fact that, yeah.
Well, it super impresses me, and it speaks to your character specifically, because a lot of people might have been like, well, that could have gone better, and kind of given up, but you didn't.
I didn't, and my grade didn't go up either.
Totally selfless.
It did. But so that was one piece of this. The other piece is personal but different, and I think it's equally important. My very first job in this field was working on a crisis line. I was 19 years old. I was very excited to get into the field. And I went to a training program. I got accepted to a training program. I was the youngest person ever accepted to this organization, and went through a year-long training and got to my very first night. This was back in the days of a television show called Moonlighting. I don't know if you guys even remember that show or know about that show, but that show was on Thursday nights, and it was the #1 rated show at the time. And they asked me what shift do you want to be on, and I was eager, man. I was really ready to do this, and I said Thursday night. And my very first night, I got into the phone room, and this is when we had regular phones. And I was so excited, and I sat down in that room and just listened for a little bit, and the phones were ringing, and I picked up the phone, and I started talking to a guy, and he was in his mid-30s, and he was struggling. There's no doubt he was struggling. He was having a really hard time. And turns out that I knew that he had told me that he had a gun. He had a gun with him, and he was in the kitchen. And I said, I was thinking, just thinking in my head, what did my training say I'm supposed to do in this instance? And the trainings were that you weren't allowed to talk to somebody who could hurt themselves. So I said to this guy, I said, look, I can't talk to you if you got this gun in your hand. Go put it in the other side of the room, put it someplace else, come back and let's talk. And he did that, and we talked for about half an hour or 40 minutes. And then and then tragedy hit me. Um, all of a sudden, he said, "Oh, screw this," and I heard the phone drop, and I heard it swinging and hitting a counter, and then I heard the gun go off, and I just sat there. I was stunned. This was my first job. It was my first night. It was my first call, um, and I didn't know what to do. And of course, we had a queue that we had to queue our supervisor if it was a suicide related call. So I had queued her, and she had sent the police to his home. And she came over and she sat down next to me and she said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Nothing." And she said, "You need to hang up the phone." I said, "Are you crazy? I'm not hanging up this phone." And she said, "Yeah, you have to do that." And I said, "I'm not doing that." I said, "He's gonna pick up the phone. He's gonna talk to me again." And in my heart of hearts, I believed he was. I was hoping he was. And a few minutes later, I heard this pounding, and it was the police. And they broke in, and they came over and they picked up the phone. And this officer picked up the phone and said, "Hello." And I said, "My name is Dan. I'm over at the crisis center. I've been talking to him." And he said, I'm very sorry to tell you that we lost him." And I was stunned, right? And so this now was personal. My supervisor said, now you have to hang up the phone," and I did. And she said, "You need to go home." And all I could think to myself was, if I go home, I'm never coming back. So I said, "Let me just go take a break." So I went into the break room, and I was in this break room all by myself, and that probably wasn't the greatest thing. And somebody who was working on the overnight shift came in, and she was on her lunch break. And I know it's a long-winded story, but this is a part of really how I developed who I am and how I've survived dealing with suicide all these years. As I watched her come into the lunchroom, she didn't know me. She had never met me. This was my first shift. And she said to me, or she didn't say anything to me. She sat down and she was eating. And I was like talking to her in my head. I'm like, "Don't you know what I just went through? Don't you understand this? I need to talk to somebody." And I couldn't. I didn't know what to say. And she ate her lunch, just went on and ate her lunch. And then she got up and she walked out. And I thought to myself, you see, this is why I have to go back into that room, because no matter how much pain I'm in, other people are not at this moment. And because she could just go on, I knew that there was this separation between what was happening to me and everybody else. And I clearly knew at that moment I needed a boundary. And my boundary was around what had happened. So I went back into the phone room about a half an hour later, and I sat down. I picked up. I took a call from a young person, and I went out for the rest of my night. And I've never forgotten that story, because what it taught me is that we all live through horrible things. We all do. but there's other things that are going on for other people in the world, and they can help. And that's what we do at Save, is we find ways to help people in their darkest moments, whether they're in crisis themselves, or they're worried about somebody in their family, or they're worried about a friend, they don't know what to do or where to turn, and everything is out of control for them. We can be that place that they can turn to. Or when they've lost somebody and they're just heartbroken and grief stricken, we can be there to help people. That's how I got started in this. That's what keeps me going in this. And I get inspired by you and the things that you're doing, because the things that you're doing are helping us in ways that we can't ever do.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit about, because a lot of people have donated money, but most of the time you do a charity and people don't know directly how that money helps. Would you be able to tell us about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So just to give you a simple example, we have these wallet cards that we sell. There's 100 of them in a pack of wallet cards, and they're $25. So anybody who donates $25, you can know that one pack of wallet cards, 100 wallet cards, is going to go to a school, or it's going to go to a mental health clinic, or it's going to go to a hospital. That's what $25 can do for one thing. That's 100 people. They're getting suicide information. They're getting information about who to turn to in a crisis. And that's just one thing. You guys are over $3,000, or pretty darn near $3,000.
We crossed $3,000. I think I saw go by. Yeah.
You crossed $3,000. So
wow.
You can see, even if we were just to distribute wallet cards, how many thousands of wallet cards we give out. We sell coping guides. These coping guides are like life-saving booklets for families that have just been impacted by a suicide. They're $7.50. Anybody who donates $7.50, that is going to help an entire family get through the grief that they deal with. Now, there are other things that we spend our money on at Save that are more expensive. For example, we get radio ads that are donated. We work in partnership with radio stations across the country, but typically that costs a lot of money. So instead, while we get those donated, we pay for other kinds of advertising, and we get special rates. So we might spend $2,500 on television ads, and we get $10,000 worth of advertising. $10,000 worth of advertising. That reaches millions and millions of people. If we spend $500 on ads on Facebook or on Google ads, we literally can reach millions of people. About a year ago, we developed a brand new campaign. There was a group of people who had a big fundraising event for us in Chicago, Illinois. And we spent about $40,000 to create a brand new media campaign. This media campaign was radio ads, was digital ads, was outdoor advertising on the trains and on buses and at bus stops all over Chicago. We had well over 10 million exposures of this, 10 million exposures. And we didn't spend that much. We only spent about $12,000 because of the partnership that we have with these ad companies. So whether we spend $25 on those wallet cards, we spend $2,500 on advertising, we're reaching millions of people every day with messages all over the country, and in fact, all over the world.
These discounts. Sorry, Bogle.
Well, I want to say that is amazing to hear. I mean, people are saying it in chat as well, but the fact that you're making what we're doing very real, whereas personally for me, this whole day has been very unreal. That has maybe something to do with the fact that I haven't slept in a while, but also because it's these numbers are so high that I can't really. I'm glad you're putting what we're doing in perspective. That is actually really helpful just for me. So thank you so much. And also I want to say thank you for sharing that story. That is heartfelt, horrible, but also uplifting in a way. And thank you. Absolutely.
Bogle, could I've lost video of you. It froze and has gone blank. Could I get you to leave and rejoin, see if it'll refresh that?
Is it me? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think it's you. At least I hope it is.
Yeah.
I hope it's you.
Sure, I can take a hint.
Dr. Dan, has that? How did that discount partnership come about? Has it always been that way, or is that something that Save has created for itself?
No, I've spent almost 20 years building those relationships across the country and around the world with different ad agencies, different people that produce, whether, for example, we used to do lots of billboards, and we would pay for, and let me let him back in here. Um, we would pay for and create the vinyl wraps or the paper wraps. We would pay for that. Um, but what we did is we had relationships with companies that had the actual signage. And then we would have relationships with people that put the signs up. So it was always a partnership. Same thing is true for print advertising, digital advertising. We spend a lot of time building these relationships. I can tell you, I was talking about the radio ads. I have a very close friend who is uh, um, huge in the radio world, in the radio advertising world, and she has a relationship with 440 radio stations across the country. And she picks a cause that's important to her, and she tells the radio stations, "Look, I'm gonna book ads with you, but you have to run ads for me that I want done free." So every day, every single day of the year, we have at least two radio ads on every single day on over 440 radio stations across the country, reaching millions and millions of people every single day. Costs us nothing. We created a campaign. That's what I was mentioning a little bit before. It's called Today's the Day. You can actually go to our website at save.org and see that. But it's called Today is the Day. And the whole concept about today is the day is that today's the day I talk to my friend about what's going on. Today's the day I'm going to talk to my boss about what's happening for me. Or today's the day I'm talking to my doctor. And so we have not only these radio spots that are going out, we had all these digital ads that were going out, and we had all of the ads on trains and buses, but we had a big Facebook campaign that went out across the country, and all of the stuff we did on Facebook we got in kind. So that's how we do this, and we spend a lot of time building those relationships.
Bogle, there's been a couple questions asked in the chat. Is there some that are relevant to the conversation we've had so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been keeping track of them. A lot of people, definitely being touched by all the stories that you're telling. Some of them are saying, can we get Dr. Dan to play the game? Which I think you mentioned earlier.
I could.
I've seen a lot of people praising your character and stuff going by
Absolutely.
in chat.
Like an Apple asks, if we can ask to hear an example of what safe language would look like compared to non-safe language.
Yes.
This is a question
Sure.
that was asked a while ago when you were talking about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So sometimes we have people that'll say, "You're not really going to kill yourself, are you?" Um, no, it's actually okay to use the word kill when you're asking a question about somebody who might be at risk. We have to ask that with a fatality component. Actually, it's really a complicated kind of piece to it. You can say you're going to die, you just want to die, you don't want to be alive anymore. You can say you're going to kill yourself. But when it's phrased in that way, it's not safe. It's that discounting piece. You're not really going to do this, or you wouldn't leave us all behind, would you? Um, and you'd be surprised how often that happens. Another thing around, so some of it's language, some of it's around images. We have one of the major challenges we have is with military. There are many parts of the military and veterans organizations that create posters, and they put a picture of a veteran or somebody who's in the military, and now they look distraught. They have them sitting there with a gun in their hand. Now, I've been watching On and Off today, and obviously there are guns involved in all of this, right? That's a very different kind of thing than if you're putting out a suicide prevention poster when you have somebody sitting there with a gun. We know that if you look at some of the research, what it tells us is that those people who are more familiar with firearms and that are depressed, their rates of death by suicide are higher. So some of it is around how we talk about it. Some of it is about the images that we use. Other examples, we try to avoid using the color red in different kind of messaging because it's associated with blood and death. Again, in different settings, it works just fine. Look at the shirts that you're
Yeah, I
wearing,
was just gonna.
right? You got red on them. It's not a big deal. But when you're talking about a suicide prevention poster, we want to avoid things like that. So safe messaging is about how do we get a right message out. So here's an example. Have you been depressed? Have you been not feeling so great lately? What's going on? You don't feel like yourself lately. You don't seem like yourself. You seem to be out of character. Those are all really safe kinds of messages. But other kinds of messages where people discount people, or they say, um, you know, only crazy people kill themselves. Well, the word crazy not only stigmatizes, but it demeans people. Um, and we know that people that die by suicide, if they have a mental health issue, we don't want to call them crazy. So we don't want language out there that's somebody saying, you got to be crazy to kill yourself. That's safe messaging.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Lady Game Guy, who, by the way, I'm going to call her out here, but she also said, I can listen to Dr. Dan speak all night. He's so great. Also asked, as someone who employs a lot of youths, I see them struggle mentally more often than not these days, and preparing for conversations on suicide is something most bosses aren't prepared for. What is it? And I think this is a really important question. I think we were planning on touching it anyway.
Yeah.
What is a good way to respond to someone who has expressed to you that they are having thoughts of suicide?
Oh, okay. So really great question. So I need to take a step back before I get to that first step, that piece of it. So if we don't have any idea, in her direct question, somebody's already expressed this, or there's already reason to believe it, we got to take a step back. And that very first step back is, hey, I'm not sure what's going on, right? My gut's telling me something's going on with you, but I don't know what it is. So you wanna see if you can engage them in a conversation. How you doing? What's been going on lately? You don't seem like yourself. Very broad-based open questions. Key to this, though, is that you can't just ask the question. You've got to follow it up with another sentence. So, hey, you don't seem like yourself lately. You seem really angry or irritable a lot. How can I help? Or what can I do? Or can we talk? It's two parts. It's giving them feedback. It's giving them an observation, and it's offering something. Okay, so that's your first step when you have no idea if they're really about suicide or not. You just don't know what's going on. It's okay to broach that conversation with them, and it's great. And then you want to listen. You want to hear what's going on for them. You want to hear whether or not there actually might be suicide in it or not. If there's not, then just keep listening, keep giving them feedback, keep talking that through with them, offering them support. All of those things are really important. But if you get a clue in that conversation that they might have thought about suicide, or in the instance that she was talking about, where somebody says, hey, I was just talking to my friend Jimmy, and Jimmy's not thinking right in his head, and I think he's suicidal, and he's going to kill himself later tonight, or he's said something to me like that. Okay, now she's got to go talk to him. This is a very different conversation than the one I just said. This is a conversation of, hey, I'm worried about you. Have you been thinking about this? And here's the key. We know that on the continuum of being really well to not being alive any longer, as you get closer and closer to death, the brain only thinks about two things. It thinks about the pain that it's in, utter agony, and death. Dying is my only way out of the pain. So on that end of the continuum, if we were just to go up to somebody and say, hey, you haven't been like yourself lately, their brain isn't there. That was earlier on. We've got to address the death part of it. So when I train doctors, when I train people on how to do this, I explain to them, you've got to have a fatality component to your question. Are you going to kill yourself? You just want to die? You don't want to live any longer? You just don't want to be on the planet anymore? That's the only way to connect with that brain, where that brain is at the time. Okay, so now when you've asked that question, what you need to listen for are some very specific things. We need to know, do they have a plan? What if they do have a plan? What is their plan? We need to know, when were they thinking about it? If they say to you, You know what? Yeah, you know what? I thought about it a couple weeks ago, but I haven't thought about it since. Okay, that's very different than if they say, well, yeah, I think about it. I was thinking about it last night. Okay, now we have a time frame that we need to pay attention to. If they tell us a plan, that a method that they know, right? If they don't have a method in place, they're just like, well, I think about what it'd be like if I wasn't here anymore. That's very different than if they say, yeah, last night I went and I was looking around the house and I know exactly where I can go to hang myself. Okay, now we know some different things. So it's those two very different conversations. One is just, I'm worried, I don't know what's going on, broad-based open question, listen, support, encourage. You have reason to believe somebody's at risk of suicide. Got to ask them. You got to ask them directly, and then you want to listen for what's going on, help make some sense of that, and then we get into the more training piece of it where we classify is it high, moderate, or low risk, and what do you do with that. But you always want to follow up, no matter which of these conversations you're having. Got to make sure you're following up with somebody. We have a lot of research that tells us following up is very, very important. Check in with them, touch base with them. Could be in an hour, could be in 2 hours, could be a day later. You need to make sure you're checking in with them just to kind of keep them going through this crisis. Here's the last thing I'll say about this piece. We have lots of research that says if you ask somebody about suicide, it's not going to make them more suicidal. It's not going to lead them down that path. It's not going to put a thought into their head that they didn't already have. In fact, the research clearly demonstrates that if you ask somebody and that's what they're thinking about, it decreases their anxiety, it lowers their risk of death. Now, it may not mean that they might still not do it or attempt it or try it, or we might need to get them into care, but asking doesn't hurt. It actually can save a life.
So for somebody that's had a conversation with somebody and they say, yeah, I do have a plan. What is their next step if they're, that they can't help them on their own? It's out of their skill set. Say, they're the manager of a restaurant.
Right, absolutely. So first thing is you want to make sure they're safe, right? You want to stay with them if you can be with them, even if it's got to be virtual, right? Stay with me. We're going to keep talking. We're going to get through this together. You've got to make sure that they know you are connected to them. You become their life source. Think of this as CPR for the brain. You've got to be that person that is their lifeline. You're offering them time. You're offering them yourself. There's nothing else that's more important at this moment when somebody is thinking about taking their life than you being connected to them. Stay with them. Make sure you find if there's resources that you can offer to them. Now, like for example, all the technology companies, social media companies, you can report that. You don't get identified to the person, it's all anonymous, and they'll send them resources. They'll send them information on where they can go in their local community. So if you're halfway around the world, they're still going to send resources to them to get them help. You might want to know what for example, the national hotline number is, or around the world, Befrienders has a hotline people can call all over the world. You want to know what resources are. And the reason you want to know what resources are, one or two of them, don't need to know a lot, is because that person who's thinking about suicide isn't thinking about resources. They aren't thinking about who could help or who might be able to help. But if you could offer that, it gives them a sense of hope. So that's the second thing. So the first thing is stay with them, stay connected. Second thing is know resources and offer those resources. Third thing to do, make sure there's nothing around them that can hurt themselves. You heard my story. I know what it's like to be in that moment where somebody could do that. You got to find out, do they have something that's going to hurt themselves right there? You got to find out if they've already taken a bottle of pills or whatever they were thinking about using. You got to make sure that those are away and safe from the person. Now, you may not take them away from them, but you got to make sure that they're safe. Now, in the far off instance, it's imminent, it's critical, it's right now, it's in the moment. You are scared to death that they are going to die. You might have to call emergency services. You might have to call 911 or whatever it is in your country. You might have to call police to save a life. And I will tell you that far too often we have people that call our office, that come to our office, that email us saying, I knew, but I didn't do anything. I was concerned, but I was keeping a secret from my friend. I knew, but I didn't know what to do because I was so afraid that if they found out that I'm the one that called the police, and they were taken off to a hospital. They were going to blame me and I was going to lose my friend. I will tell you, it is much, much better to live with yourself, losing a friendship, than going to their funeral. It is. You don't want to do that. Lose the friendship. Most of the time, you're not going to. Most of the time, they're going to be thankful for you saving their life. We have to find a way to take away the stigma around these illnesses and around this problem that we call suicide from people needing help. If somebody is dying of a heart attack, you don't just say, okay, well, look, we're just going to give you some chest compressions and give you a little oxygen and let you go home. No, you're going to an ER. You're going to a hospital. If you are in that kind of crisis where you are at the place that you just want it over, we need to get you some help. And we know that suicide is the most preventable death that there is. If we can catch it early, we can save lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. A lot of people in chat responding very
Yes.
positively to what you're saying.
Do you have
It's definitely helpful. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you have some more questions that were asked? I know there was a bunch of questions asked.
Yes, there are. Just a question to chat that if you want to ask a question, please add me in the chat so I can more easily see it. I think Backlog Cabin actually has a great question. Does your network of outreach workers vary depending on class, race, or gender? Like, for example, do you have people trained who are members of non-English speaking communities or have been homeless or maybe are transgender counselors?
We have about 1,500 volunteers across the country in the United States, and we're trying to expand into other countries. We have some groups in India that are starting to work for us, some in South America that are working with us. We have people, we do not discriminate. And in fact, we are all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, just like really everybody is. You see, mental illnesses don't pick you based on the color of your skin or what religion you are or your age or your gender. We know that mental illnesses affect all of us. So we need people that can do and work with us in a lot of different ways. We have a whole set of booklets and guides for the LGBTQ community that were in fact cited and recognized by the head of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, saw the guides, and he actually told them to purchase them, so they were distributed to all people that work for the CDC, received our LGBTQ guides. So we've tried to find volunteers that can help us and go out and speak and deliver our materials. And we have charters across the United States. These are small little groups of volunteers that come together and they do events and they go to health fairs and they distribute information. They speak in schools and in hospitals. They share stories. And we're always trying to find people of all backgrounds to help us.
Wonderful, wonderful. I definitely want to. We should have a look at how much time we have left, but I definitely want to ask this question.
We've got 17 minutes, so technically plenty of time.
Yes, exactly. Okay, good. Anna Neko asks, how do I realize that I'm having suicidal thoughts? I've read that a lot of victims don't even really acknowledge their death thoughts.
Another great question. And some people don't realize how close they are. You see, as somebody goes from being really well to being okay to being ill to being at risk of suicide, they don't see the slide coming. They're just living in each moment as they go along on that continuum. This is why it's so important that we get feedback from other people around us, people that know us, people that we trust, to tell us what's going on. But some of the other things that you can try to watch for, people withdrawing, they pull away from everybody in their life, and not just people, but they pull away from things that they enjoy, things that they really like to do, hobbies, interests, fun things. So when you see that kind of withdrawal, if you're feeling you're isolated from everybody in the world, that could be a sign that things are a little bit further along the line for you than before. If you maybe have thought about suicide but never had a plan, and then all of a sudden you start trying to imagine, kind of how would you do it? That's a sign to you that things are progressing in a bad way. So part of it is about others recognizing and trying to help us and give us feedback. Part of it is about us looking for different signs. Let me talk about a little about the signs, the warning signs for suicide for a second. So there's two particular warning signs that out of everybody who dies by suicide, when we look at them, they all do this. Somehow they communicate their death, their intent to die, or they look for a way to die. Two key warning signs: communicating their intent. So somehow talking about it, either directly, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, or indirectly, everybody'd be better off without me. Okay, so that's a communication. The second warning sign is looking for a way to die. If you find yourself looking for a firearm, looking for sharp objects, looking for medications, looking for any of those kinds of things, that's a warning sign that we want you to pay attention to in other people and should know about yourself. This next group of warning signs is almost equally important, but it's very different. Um, if you find yourself thinking, I'm hopeless, there's no reason to go on any longer, there's no reason for me to be alive, I have no purpose anymore, there's no hope anymore, that sense of hopelessness and despair, lack of purpose, that's a warning sign, the key warning sign. Another is feeling trapped. If you feel like you're trapped and there's no way out of your situation, that is a very significant warning sign. So we want to pay attention to all of these things as warning signs, um, to make sure that we're seeing them in ourselves and we're seeing them in other people.
Thank you so much. I think Matt Glad, I think that partly answers your question as well. Let me know if that is incorrect. The final thing that people are asking for, Beloferon Jones, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry. You mentioned this a little earlier in what you were talking about. Could you talk a little bit more about contagion? They say we had a suicide recently by a campus leader, and his death was felt by many, including some folks with inappropriate guilt.
Yes. And you see, this is one of the tragedies of suicide. There's so many, but the fallout, right? People feel guilty, responsible. What did I not see? What did I not do? Did I do something that caused this? And we know that none of those things are real, but that's how people feel. They live with this forever why question. How come they just didn't call me? How come they just didn't text me, just reach out to me? I would have done anything. And this is a tragedy that was on for the survivors, those who are left behind by suicide. So suicide contagion is a real phenomenon. Again, it's really small. It's about 1 to 3% of all suicides, and it's particularly a sensitive issue for young people, but it's true for all people. And we know that it happens far more often when it's a celebrity or somebody who's well known in the community. But suicide contagion is about one person being influenced by the death of somebody else. So an easy way to explain this is we have a young person dies by suicide. They're in a school. Messages go out about that very widely. There's this overwhelming sense of grief that goes on. Somebody inappropriately, they build up a memorial for the person, and then somebody else is at risk. They're thinking about suicide, or they've been depressed for a long time, or they're kind of isolated. They feel like an outcast, and they're like, hey, if this person died by suicide and they got all of that, and I'm this bad too, if I die by suicide, I'm going to get that too. And that's where we start to see contagion. We also see contagion around, for example, celebrities like Robin Williams. We had a definite increase in deaths in the same manner that he died, in the immediate 2 months after his death, really the immediate 3 weeks. But we know that when we give out methods and when we have media and lots of stories that go out, not even just by media, but by just people talking, where there's messages that are inappropriate about how and when and how and who is involved, the more people relate to that person, the more likely it is we're going to see contagion. We're going to see other people dying too. So, for example, with the media, when they tell stories about somebody who died by suicide, it could be anybody, it could be a teacher, it could be a law enforcement officer. I try to get them to tell as few stories and details about that person as possible. Give enough so that your audience can relate. It was a male and he was 35 and he was a dad. But when we give too many details, too many people can relate to that, and they start to see themselves going down that same path. That's what contagion is.
There was something you mentioned earlier, and I don't think we touched on it, but you said that the warning signs were different between teenagers and adults.
There's some overlap between some of the warning signs for young people and for adults. What we see is a difference in young people. Young people tend not to talk about their future. They're all about right here and right now. So for a young person, if a young person starts talking about having no future, that's a very key warning sign for a young person, whereas it's one warning sign for adults. We also know that young people have these wild emotional swings. It's normal. It happens, right? All of the time. If all of a sudden those mood swings stop and there's just one, they become very angry, or they become very irritable, or they become very depressed, and all their other mood seems to go away, that's another kind of warning sign that we see. Young people, more than adults, will give things away. They'll return things that they borrowed from people. Young people will give away awards that they had. They'll return things that they've been holding on in their locker from a friend for a long time. So they do some things that are a little bit different than do adults. And so we need to pay attention to them differently. So we have a whole website just for youth suicide warning signs. It's youthsuicidewarningsigns.org. And you can go there, and if you're a student, a parent, a teacher, whatever it is, a healthcare worker, you can see those warning signs. And they're very different than the other warning signs that are on our website.
Awesome. Thank you. We're getting towards the end here. Thank you so much for coming to join us, and I'm so glad that
absolutely.
we could hook up with you and, you know, fundraise to help you guys reach people. I got one last question before we let you go, and it was, if you had one message for all the people watching the stream right now, what would it be? You know, put you on the spot.
My one message, outside of thank you, from the bottom of my heart, because you're connecting with people that I never would get to connect to. And if nothing else comes out of this, the opportunity to see what's going on today is inspiring to me. So thank you for inspiring me and our staff to keep doing this work. Outside of that, thank you for what you're doing and giving us this opportunity to share a message. I'd say that you're all part of this. We know that a majority of the people who die by suicide make the final decision within 5 minutes, 10 minutes at the most. That means that it's all of you that are going to be out there that have to do something and see something and say something. And if something that I said tonight, any one thing that I said tonight could make a difference in you seeing something or doing something that saves somebody else's life because you feel like you can now, or you have a different way of looking at it or a different way of seeing it, that's amazing. It's how powerful what it is you're doing is by one simple act of you creating this event and me getting to connect with all of you to say, here's what to do. You're saving lives. All of you are saving lives. And it's more than just the money you're giving. It's what you're doing. It's saving lives. We can't do this alone. We're a small staff. There's 7 of us. We have lots of volunteers. But we need an army of people around the world to do this work. And so tonight, I feel like our army has grown by more than 50 people. And you've done that. You've made that happen. So my message would be thank you. And it would be, you can do this. You too can save somebody's life.
Awesome.
Thank you for putting that way. While you were talking, I'm kind of realizing that the way that we've structured this event, because it includes so many streamers, right? 22 in the event alone, and then a lot more people that couldn't join but are still like active in chat. We all have, however small or big, prime group of people basically to inform with this information, and for you to be here and talk to all of us it's even more helpful, I think, because we're, you know, in a sense, community leaders, however small. So thank you so much for that. I also want to briefly mention what Emmy says. Thanks, Dr. Dan. I really admire your informed yet down-to-earth approach on such a sensitive and significant topic. I feel like I've obtained invaluable practical and actionable skills. Thank you so much for facilitating this, and I wanna echo that sentiment for sure.
I've seen several messages go by just out of the corner of my eye of people that other streamers that have said this is very good information that they can use within their own streaming communities. And you know, so that's a multiple. I'm really sorry about those alert notifications. If you guys could hold off following, please, just until we're done here. So that's a multiplication factor, and that I think that's really incredible. And everybody watching this VOD's gonna stay up. I will back it up on YouTube. If it's something like, I'm not trying to self-promote my channel or anything like that, but if you want to share this with anybody in your community, please do. It'll be here. If for some reason you can't find it and it's been moved to YouTube, I will absolutely get you a link. Whisper at me, talk to me on Discord, you know, whatever, it'll be here.
I was going to say the same thing, and I know I'm going to be watching this again, probably again and again. Like I've been sort of multitasking between chat and listening. I'm definitely looking forward to watching this again, and I think a lot of people should.
Before we go, I just want to offer this up. I'm going to offer $500 as a donation. If you guys can raise $500, 500 more before the end of this, I'll match that. I'll bring a check into our office on Monday, and I'll match it.
Wow.
Thank you.
All right. All right, John, we're gonna have to get tattoos, I think.
Bogle and I have a marker at one point. I forget what it was, $3,000 or $4,000, where we're gonna get the Save&Raid floppy disk tattoo because 5K. This has been
we're a ways away, but that means that before the end, which is in 6 hours, we need to raise 500. I think that we can do that. I think we can definitely do that. You guys
have all been incredible. You know, and before, so we're gonna raid the next person, which I will look here in a second. But I just want to say this before I forget. So something I've been doing with my community when I sign off, because everybody, if you have followed this channel and you've hung out with me, you know that this is a positive place. Like, we come here to love and appreciate things and respect each other. And I've been saying over the last couple months, as we you know, as I sign off, like, one of the last things I always say is, you know, leave here and find somebody, anybody, and tell them, you know, how much they're worth to you, how much you appreciate them, how important they are, because somebody needs to hear it. And I would love that if all of the streamers here and everybody else went away with something like that. I mean, you can absolutely steal mine. I don't, you know, that's fine. But I think it's really important because you just don't know sometimes.
We don't.
I agree.
We don't. But hopefully after tonight, this is going to save somebody's life.
I am positive that it will.
I am 100% sure of that.
And regardless of the money and everybody here, I think that is the biggest thing that is making me so happy for today. So thanks everyone. And thanks, Dr. Dan, for being here. This was an illuminating hour. And yeah, thank you so much.
And
it's awesome, you guys. I hope everybody has a blast with the rest of this. I'll be checking in every once in a while, dreaming of how I could play this game. And
you can do it. I have faith.
And I'll be inspired by all of these.
So. You know, this is not going to be the only one of these. This has been a resounding success, even at the 3/4 mark. So, you know, we look forward to working with you again in the future if possible. And, you know, maybe you can be one of the streamers.
Okay. All right. I hope everybody has a great time. Thank you very much. I look forward to writing out that check. So keep me posted on the $500.
Absolutely.
We will.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.